Thank you for joining another edition of The Never Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement for Companies Running SAP. And it is a tremendous pleasure today to welcome Rishad. Rishad is a futurist and a keynote speaker and an author and an influencer on an entire community to help people level up the way they think about things. And Rishad, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for inviting me, and also thank you for sponsoring my keynote at the big SAP Architect Conference.
Hey, that is our pleasure. One of the things that I love about the way that you talk about the future doesn't fit in the boxes of the past, and I relate this to something that I often love thinking about, and this idea of what got you here won't get you there.
Right.
And this concept of the things that hold us back, whether it's beliefs that hold us back, or the thing on the table that everybody maybe they think it's a brownie. Can you share with us?
Sure.
What do you want more people to think about?
Sure. So 3 things I think I'd like most people to think about. The first is, the line I use is the future does not fit in the containers of the past, which is very much like you say, what brought you here may not take you there.
Yeah.
Right? But what is very interesting is if you look at not your company or your own life, but you look around you and think about the things that you believed true 25 years ago, 50 years ago, and today. And many of the things that you thought were absolutely true didn't turn out to be that true because the world changed, right? So,
and were they even true to begin with?
Nobody knows. But for instance, if somebody had told you 25 years ago that you would have in your device, at that time, the desktop PC had 3.5 million transistors, right? That you would have in your pocket something with 1.5 billion transistors, that you would have something that could contain and access all the music in the world, all the video in the world, take better photography than anything, send it to anybody in the world, right? And all of that would cost, depending on who you were buying it from, between $300 to $1,000.
Yeah.
You'd say, whoever talks about that is a lunatic, right? But that's what mobility and mobile, computing
It's what
is,
it's unlocked.
right?
Yeah.
So similarly, if 10, 15, 20 years from now, people would say, you mean to say you actually had to type out the answer to that versus ask GPT-55 to type out the answer, right? And so that's one of the key things I basically say is like, so many of the things we freeze. The world moves forward, but we think we are frozen, but we're not frozen. And then the other one, why people have a big difficulty, is often they don't face reality, they don't face the truth, they don't call out what I call the turd on the table.
It's inconvenient, isn't it?
It is inconvenient because, sitting around a table, there's something brown and moist, everybody pretends it's a brownie, but nobody wants to call it a piece of shit because either the boss will get very worried about it, or maybe it's not a piece of shit, or very likely, if you call it a piece of shit, they make you clean it up and you already have too much on your cleaning agenda. So everybody pretends it's not there. So a combination of either being frozen and saying the future is going to be the past, which has never been true, or I refuse to accept reality because I'm too scared of it to call it out, are the 2 things that we have to be very aware about. And the third one is, how do we address this? And the way I sort of address is, how do we upgrade our mental operating system? That, whether it's the iOS, which is in the 17th version, or Mac OS, which is the 14th version. Now Windows no longer names it by year, but it's constantly being updated.
Yeah.
And I haven't recently used an Android phone, but Samsung is on its 22nd or 24th phone.
Yeah.
And so to a great extent, the other thing to basically do is make sure we ourselves are upgrading our own mental operating systems by spending time learning, building a case for the exact opposite. So once we do that, we can be successful, right? Don't predict the future by the past. Face reality, call out the turd on the table. Invest in learning and upgrading your mental operating system.
Yeah.
And you don't have to ask permission for those 3. You can do it yourself.
And when you do that, in in everything that I've come across, it creates opportunities
Yes,
to address the turd on the table.
it does. It
and,
does.
And that thing on the table is often kind of the elephant in the room, the turd on the table, the thing that's holding an organization back because it's an inconvenient thing to address.
Yes, and it's as whether it was, the famous book that Al Gore wrote, Inconvenient Truth.
Yeah.
Right. But it's there, and if you don't address it, then you begin to have a big issue, either personally, in your firm, as a culture. Everything gets built on two things: a lie and fear. Okay.
There's so many ways that those are
Right.
twisted to
Right.
create
And-
really
and-
unfortunate outcomes.
And it's a lie and fear. And human beings love being deceived. So often we feed ourselves lies. Okay. We look for confirming evidence. We look for evidence, right? That's confirming.
It's comforting.
It's comforting.
Because it means you don't have to stretch.
Yes, and as I mentioned, you don't have to change, and change sucks. Because it's difficult, right? It's like twisting and transforming yourself into new shapes. So that's one. So what we do is we self-medicate with our own lies,
Yep.
or we are fearful, right? Fearful of our boss, fearful for our jobs, fearful about things. So then our whole stuff is, I'm going to lie to myself to not face the reality of my fears.
Yep.
And that turns out to be self-defeating, because in effect, you yourself know that you are lying. You yourself know you're not making the right decisions because of fear.
Yep.
So you feel actually sad even while you're self-medicating. It's basically like no drug addict feels good on an ongoing basis. They just feel good once in a while, right? And this is like that.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to get off drugs. So it's so hard to get off, imaginary living. And human beings love imaginary living, and actually it's good. That's the arts and the books and everything.
Yeah.
But you have to also live in reality. And people ask me, why is that important? I say, look, I really don't care, and nobody really cares what you think about gravity, what you tweet about gravity, whether gravity is fake news. You jump out of a 27th floor building, you are a dead person. Gravity doesn't care. And so my basic belief is reality doesn't care about you. Facts are stubborn things, right?
They're beautifully stubborn.
They're beautifully stubborn. And that's
They're persistent.
They're persistent. And my whole thing is, everybody is smart enough to know that. And so the faster you can basically say, I know what this is. I know this is the turn on the table. Let's call it the turn on the table. Let's also then, if we want, we can pretend it's not on the turn of the table, and we can put a little bow tie on it and pretend it's a dog on the table. But we all agree it's a turn on the table, right? Now we can then fool ourselves after we understand reality.
And when a group of people around the table have been avoiding talking about this,
Yes.
and there's maybe a personality, maybe they're senior, or they're somebody who's at the table who had a hand in building that turd, and they still kind of own it, and other people around the table are scared about what's going to happen. Either the person loses their temper, or they might fire people, or somebody's going to fly off the handle,
Yep.
or maybe a whole line of business could be destroyed if
Yes.
this turd is left unchecked, because maybe the market is moving, and maybe digital has been invented, and
Yes.
hard film is no longer as relevant. But it's a great business model from yesterday.
Yes, it's a great business model from yesterday. So what happens is there are three things, and I always point to this. And it's a true story. And the true story basically is, for years, everybody in the automobile sector recognized that there were two things that were happening, that were two questions that would be asked, which were inconvenient questions. So Elon Musk was asking, is the future of automobiles software and electric? While everybody who was running an automobile company had grown up on hardware and internal combustion engine.
Yep.
Right? So you're a very successful individual running a company, and someone basically says everything that you've learned is no longer actually true for the future. Your answer isn't, I gotta reinvent myself. It's like, shut the F up. I don't believe you.
They don't want to hear it.
I don't want to hear it. Similarly, another group of people came in and asked the question, and the same people who are internal combustion engineers and software also tend to come hard charging from sales. So some other company, like, at that time it was Travis, was basically sort of asking, do you need to own a car? And that was Uber. So the Uber and Tesla questions, and Uber and Tesla became very valuable.
Yep.
Right.
And how many people who are 20 years old don't have a driver's license? They don't want to own
Yes.
a car
And-
because
and
they have an app that gets them where they need to go.
Right. So similarly, then everybody says, okay, electric it is. So we're going to go all 100% into electric. Then somebody else croaks from Japan and says, maybe, yes, electric might be the future, but the transition will be slower, and we've got to slowly take people there. And there's only like 10 to 20% of the people who are willing to go to electric right away, either because of range anxiety or a lot of other things,
Yep.
high costs of cars, etc. So today, the electric car manufacturers are having problems. If you've seen the stock price of Lucid or Rivian or even Tesla.
Yeah.
And who has doubled stock price this last year? Toyota, right? And what Toyota say is, oh yeah, we believe in electric, but we got to get there slowly. So we're putting all of our money in hybrids.
And
right?
we'll
Different
move
rate-
there.
and we'll move there bit by bit. We'll meet the emission standards, but we'll move there.
Change is
And
hard.
that's, everybody says this, and so there's this crowd mentality and herd mentality. So my own stuff is two things: talk about the turd on the table,
Yep.
and you are not a cow. Just remind yourself you are not a cow. You don't have to say moo and go in a herd everywhere.
Lemmings will follow each other and jump off the
Yeah,
cliff. That
exactly.
doesn't make the path correct.
Exactly.
I love it. Rishad, thank you so much for joining,
Welcome.
for helping encourage people to write a better program, to
Yes.
run their life, and to help us all ask better questions.
Thank you very much. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bet.
And thank you for watching another edition of The Never Ending Climb for a stronger supply chain and procurement for companies running SAP.
Perfect.